There exists a particular moment, quiet and almost completely invisible, when a narcissistic person looks directly at you and suddenly realizes that you no longer see them through the illusion they created. It is not a dramatic confrontation. It is not always an argument, a raised voice, or a grand revelation. Sometimes it happens in a single pause, a change in your expression, a calmness in your presence that tells them something has shifted. For a long time, they may have relied on a carefully built image. They may have presented themselves as confident, untouchable, superior, endlessly successful, always right, or completely in control. This image becomes like a carefully painted stage set designed to convince others and eventually themselves. Behind that performance can exist a much more fragile emotional world, one filled with insecurity, shame, fear of rejection, and an intense need to protect their self-image. The moment they realize you see beyond the performance can feel deeply unsettling for them, because the power of the mask comes from other people believing in it. As long as someone is impressed, intimidated, dependent, or constantly seeking their approval, the illusion remains protected. But when someone becomes emotionally grounded, when they stop reacting the way they used to, the entire dynamic changes. For someone who relies heavily on external validation, attention and admiration can become a kind of emotional fuel. When others constantly praise them, seek their guidance, fear disappointing them, or work hard to maintain their approval, it reinforces the image they are trying to project. The relationship begins to revolve around preserving that image rather than creating genuine emotional connection. At first, this dynamic can feel powerful. The other person may appear confident, charismatic, or unusually certain of themselves. They may know exactly what to say, how to create a strong impression, and how to make someone feel uniquely valued. The attention can feel intense because the connection often seems centered around the other person's world, emotions, and needs. But the dynamic begins to shift when the other person becomes emotionally grounded. Emotional grounding changes the invisible rules of the relationship. Instead of immediately defending themselves, explaining themselves, or trying to earn approval, they begin responding with awareness. They pause before reacting. They observe patterns instead of getting lost in individual moments. They stop allowing guilt, confusion, or fear to determine their choices. This shift can feel unfamiliar to someone who was used to having emotional influence over them. The person who once responded instantly may now take time to think. The person who once apologized repeatedly may now calmly express their perspective. The person who once accepted blame for everything may now recognize shared responsibility. The person who once questioned their own reality may now trust their own observations. And that is often where the balance of the relationship changes. The old pattern depended on emotional reactions: anger, desperation, endless explanations, attempts to prove love, and constant reassurance could keep the cycle alive. But when those reactions disappear, the cycle loses its energy. A calm response can reveal more than 1,000 arguments. When someone says, "I understand you see it differently, but this is how I experienced it," they are no longer entering a battle for approval. When someone says, "I care about you, but I also need respect," they are no longer abandoning themselves to maintain peace. When someone accepts that they cannot control another person's behavior, they begin reclaiming control over their own life. This can create discomfort because the old methods of gaining attention or regaining control may no longer produce the same results. The relationship can no longer survive on one person's ability to influence the other's emotions. However, emotional grounding is not about punishing someone, becoming cold, or trying to win against another person. It is not about exposing, humiliating, or defeating them. It is about becoming anchored enough that another person's reactions no longer determine your sense of worth. When you stop chasing the image someone presents and start paying attention to consistent actions, the entire connection becomes clearer. You begin asking different questions. Do I feel respected here? Can we disagree without fear? Are both people allowed to have needs? Am I connecting with a person, or am I constantly trying to maintain an image of who I hope they will become? That inner shift is powerful because it moves your attention away from managing someone else's perception and back toward understanding your own reality. The illusion becomes harder to maintain when someone is no longer looking at it through the lens of fear, admiration, or dependency. A grounded person does not need to tear down another person's mask. They simply stop mistaking the mask for the whole person. You are no longer chasing their validation. You are no longer trying to prove your worth. You are no longer distracted by the charm, the confidence, or the carefully chosen words. Instead, you begin noticing patterns. You notice when affection appears only when they need something. You notice when apologies lack accountability. You notice when criticism is used to regain control. You notice the difference between genuine vulnerability and emotional performance. That awareness can be uncomfortable for someone who depends heavily on maintaining a certain image. A person who is used to controlling the narrative may suddenly feel exposed, not because you attacked them, but because you stopped participating in the illusion. This is often where the relationship dynamic begins to change. The person who once had the ability to create confusion may find that confusion no longer works. The person who once triggered emotional reactions may discover that you respond with calm observation instead. The person who once felt powerful because they could influence your emotions may feel unsettled when your peace is no longer something they can control. But an important distinction matters here. Seeing someone clearly does not mean you have discovered a hidden true self with absolute certainty. People with narcissistic traits are still complex human beings, capable of different behaviors in different situations. Some may recognize their patterns and work on them, while others may continue defending their self-image. Change depends on self-awareness, willingness, and consistent effort. The most powerful shift is not when they realize you see them. The most powerful shift is when you realize you no longer need their mask to fall in order to trust what you experienced. Because healing often begins when you stop asking, "Who are they really?" and start asking, "How do I feel when I am around them? Do their actions match their words? Does this connection allow me to remain myself?" That quiet moment is not necessarily about exposing someone else. It is about becoming so clear within yourself that someone else's performance no longer has the ability to rewrite your reality. And in that single quiet moment, something between the two of you genuinely changes forever. You may not have proper words for it just yet. You may not even fully understand exactly what just happened between you, but your body genuinely knows. Your nervous system genuinely knows. Something ancient inside you finally exhales while something inside them simultaneously begins to panic internally. If you've ever felt that exact particular moment, if you've ever sensed a genuine shift in someone you loved the very second you stopped believing their specific version of reality, then please stay with me through this. Now let's go considerably deeper into this topic, because what genuinely happens inside a narcissist, the moment they realize you see straight through them, represents one of the most psychologically intense experiences a human being can possibly witness firsthand. And most survivors witness this without ever being properly warned beforehand, without ever being adequately prepared, without ever truly understanding exactly what they're actually looking at in that moment. For a considerably long time, the narcissist depended entirely on one single thing above everything else: your genuine belief in them, your doubt in yourself, your willingness to question your own memory, your own perception, your own instincts before ever questioning theirs first. That represented the entire foundation of the relationship itself. Not genuine love, not real connection, not authentic partnership. Simply control built carefully on the quiet, gradual erosion of your own inner certainty over time. And the exact second that particular erosion finally stops, the second you genuinely begin trusting your own eyes again, the entire structure they carefully built around you starts genuinely cracking apart. At first, they sense this shift happening before they even consciously understand it themselves. Narcissists aren't genuinely emotionally intelligent people by nature, but they are emotionally observant in a distinctly predatory way. They notice even the smallest possible things: a brief pause before you answer them, a tone in your voice that no longer trembles with uncertainty, a silence that used to be filled with automatic apology, direct eye contact that no longer flinches away from them. They feel this particular shift in your overall energy long before you ever say a single word to them directly. And internally, something genuinely begins unraveling inside them, because the version of you they relied on so heavily, the anxious, doubting, self-blaming version of yourself, is slowly disappearing right in front of them. This is precisely when the various behaviors typically begin, and they almost always tend to follow a fairly predictable pattern, even though it genuinely feels completely unique and chaotic, while you're actually trapped inside experiencing it. Their first response is usually panic disguised cleverly as genuine charm. Suddenly, they become noticeably softer, considerably kinder, far more attentive than they've genuinely been in months, sometimes even years. They suddenly remember specific things they previously pretended not to care about at all. They bring up old memories they once openly mocked you for cherishing. They look at you the exact same way they used to look at you back in the very beginning, when everything felt genuinely magical and confusing at the same time. This isn't genuine love actually returning to them. This represents love bombing, simply reactivating instead. It functions as a pure survival reflex, not any kind of genuine heart opening up. They're not genuinely trying to reconnect with you as a person. They're actually trying to reinstall themselves back into your nervous system before you fully wake up completely from the fog. And if you've genuinely lived through this particular experience before, you know exactly how disorienting it truly feels. Because part of you genuinely wants to believe it's real. Part of you genuinely wants to think that maybe they've finally come to understand what they did wrong. Maybe they finally genuinely see the damage they caused. Maybe this particular time will actually be different somehow. That specific part of you isn't genuinely weak at all. That part of you is simply deeply wounded instead. It's the part that waited patiently for years for an apology that genuinely never actually came. For real accountability that genuinely never arrived. For the version of them they only ever showed you in brief glimpses, specifically designed to keep you holding on to false hope. The love bombing tactic works specifically on that particular wound, not on your actual intelligence as a person. But when the charm genuinely fails to pull you back in completely, when you manage to stay calm throughout, when you genuinely stop reacting to their attempts, when you no longer chase after them anymore, the next distinct phase begins. And this represents exactly where the mask starts genuinely slipping in ways even they themselves genuinely cannot fully control anymore. Rage typically comes next in the sequence. Sometimes it's loud and dramatic, sometimes it's completely silent instead. Sometimes it's hidden behind a smile so genuinely cold that it makes the entire room feel noticeably smaller. That particular rage isn't really about anything specific you actually did wrong. The rage is genuinely about the loss of their psychological access to you instead. For years, they could genuinely reach directly inside you and rearrange your emotions with just a single sentence, one meaningful glance, a heavy sigh, a sudden withdrawal of their affection. Now, they simply cannot do that anymore. And to a narcissist specifically, losing that particular access feels remarkably like actually dying inside because their entire sense of self was genuinely never built from within themselves in the first place. It was built instead entirely from the reflection they consistently saw within your reactions to them. When you genuinely stop reflecting them back in the specific way they desperately need, they don't simply feel rejected by you. They feel completely erased instead. This is precisely why their reactions become so genuinely disproportionate to the actual situation. Why a calm, simple boundary feels to them like an outright act of war being declared. Why your quiet silence enrages them far more than your tears ever possibly could. Why your genuine indifference feels to them exactly like a knife being driven into their chest. Because within their internal world, you were genuinely never actually a separate person from them at all. You were simply an extension of their own identity instead. And the exact moment you genuinely reclaim yourself as a separate individual, they experience it internally as a kind of profound psychological amputation happening to them. Then comes the silent treatment next, the cold emotional withdrawal, the sudden complete disappearance of warmth, communication, and genuine presence from their side. And here's what most people genuinely don't understand at all about the specific narcissistic silent treatment. It isn't genuine avoidance whatsoever. It's actual calculated punishment instead. It functions as a carefully calculated weapon specifically designed to activate every single abandonment wound you personally carry within yourself. They genuinely know exactly what your nervous system does the moment they go completely quiet on you. They've studied this pattern extensively over time. They've genuinely memorized it completely. They've used this particular tactic for years specifically to keep you feeling anxious, hyper-attentive, eager to repair the relationship, eager to apologize profusely for things you genuinely never actually did wrong in the first place. And now, when they genuinely sense you slipping away from their control, they reach for that same weapon again, desperately hoping it still works effectively on you like it always used to before. But something has genuinely changed permanently inside you now. The particular silence that used to genuinely break you emotionally now feels remarkably like fresh air instead. The distance that used to genuinely terrify you now feels like genuine clarity instead. You notice, perhaps for the very first time, exactly how peaceful your entire body feels when they're genuinely not present in the room with you. How your shoulders naturally drop with relief. How your breathing genuinely deepens naturally. How your own thoughts finally return back to you clearly. And that particular realization represents one of the most genuinely painful, yet simultaneously liberating moments a survivor ever experiences in their healing journey, because you understand quietly and completely that the specific person you once loved deeply was also simultaneously the source of the chronic stress you've carried within your body for years on end. When the silent treatment tactic ultimately fails to work on you, their projection tactics genuinely intensify instead. Suddenly, you become the narcissist in their narrative. You become the manipulator instead. You become labeled as the cruel one, the cold one, the unstable one, the abusive one in the relationship. Every single thing they actually did to you personally gets carefully repackaged and handed right back to you as though it were your own identity instead. And if you're genuinely not psychologically grounded in that particular moment, it can genuinely shake you right down to your very core. Because being accused of the exact same things that were actually done to you represents one of the most genuinely disorienting experiences a human being can possibly endure. It functions as a form of psychological inversion. Essentially, a mirror held up completely backwards, an entire reality flipped completely inside out. But here's the honest truth that genuinely took you years to finally understand fully. Projection actually functions as confession in disguise. Every single accusation they make represents their own autobiography instead. Every specific label they throw directly at you actually describes their own inner world instead, the very world they've spent their entire lifetime running desperately away from. They're not actually describing you accurately at all. They're describing instead the specific parts of themselves they've spent a lifetime avoiding completely. And when you finally genuinely see this pattern clearly, when you truly internalize this understanding completely, their words genuinely lose all their power over you. They become mere background noise instead. They become actual evidence instead. They become genuine proof of everything you always suspected, but were previously too afraid to properly name out loud. Then comes the blame-shifting tactic next, the complete rewriting of shared history, the careful surgical reconstruction of every single memory you share together. They genuinely didn't do that particular thing at all, according to them. You genuinely misremembered what happened. You exaggerated the situation. You're simply far too sensitive about everything. You're being far too dramatic about the situation. You twisted their actual words around. You genuinely provoked them into reacting that way. You forced them into doing it somehow. And for years, you may have genuinely absorbed all of this completely. You may have apologized repeatedly for things that were actually done to you instead. You may have rewritten your own personal memories entirely to match their preferred narrative, simply to help keep the peace between you. But now, something inside you genuinely refuses to comply anymore. Something inside you genuinely remembers the truth clearly. Something inside you finally genuinely believes itself completely. And this particular shift, more than anything else combined, is genuinely what terrifies them the most. Because a narcissist can genuinely survive your anger toward them. They can genuinely survive your tears as well. They can genuinely survive your direct accusations too. What they genuinely cannot survive, however, is your calm clarity, your quiet composure, your unwavering inner knowing, the specific look in your eyes that clearly says, I see you completely now, and I am no longer afraid of you at all. When charm, rage, silence, projection, and blame shifting all genuinely fail to work on you, the narcissist typically moves into even more desperate territory next. Intimidation tactics, triangulation schemes, direct reputation attacks against you. Suddenly, other people become genuinely involved in the situation. Friends who used to genuinely like you now start looking at you rather strangely. Family members who never previously questioned you start asking you rather pointed questions instead. Coworkers noticeably shift their behavior around your presence. Mutual connections gradually grow more distant from you over time. You genuinely feel this happening before you can even properly prove it's occurring. The narcissist has genuinely been working diligently behind the scenes, carefully planting seeds of doubt, dropping subtle hints here and there, painting you as unstable, ungrateful, unwell, or genuinely unkind to others. They're actively building an entire narrative, recruiting willing allies to their cause, constructing an alternate version of reality where they're the genuine victim and you're actually positioned as the dangerous threat instead. This represents one of the most genuinely painful stages of the entire awakening process, because you don't just lose the specific person you thought you once loved, you sometimes lose other people you genuinely trusted as well. People who believed their fabricated story before they ever bothered asking you a single genuine question about it. And the resulting grief from that experience proves genuinely immense. It's deeply layered. It's genuinely complicated. It represents the grief of losing not simply a relationship, but an entire social reality you once believed was genuinely stable and secure. But here's what survivors eventually come to understand clearly. The specific people who believed the smear campaign against you without ever bothering to properly ask you directly were genuinely never truly your people in the first place. They were simply extensions of the narcissist's carefully maintained social mask instead. They functioned as stage props within a performance you genuinely didn't even realize you were unknowingly part of. And while genuinely losing them certainly hurts deeply, their eventual absence from your life eventually becomes a kind of genuine cleansing experience instead. Your remaining circle becomes considerably smaller, but it becomes genuinely real and authentic. Considerably quieter, but genuinely truer to you. Less crowded overall, but finally genuinely safe for you. Then comes triangulation next in their playbook. The deliberate introduction of an entirely new person, a new ally, a new romantic interest, a new admirer, specifically paraded directly in front of you to deliberately provoke jealousy, insecurity, and unfavorable comparison within you. This genuinely isn't real love happening here at all. This represents carefully orchestrated choreography instead. That particular new person genuinely isn't actually replacing you in any meaningful sense. They're simply being used as a tool instead, a mirror carefully polished and specifically held up to your face, designed to make you doubt your own inherent worth one final time. And in the early stages of your genuine awakening process, this particular tactic can genuinely hurt you quite deeply. You may find yourself comparing yourself unfavorably to them. You may genuinely feel discarded and replaced. You may genuinely wonder why they're receiving the idealized version of the narcissist you were originally promised, but genuinely never actually received yourself. But with sufficient time passing, you genuinely come to understand the reality clearly. That new person genuinely isn't actually winning anything at all. They're simply next in line instead. They're walking directly into the exact same maze you just managed to escape from. Only they genuinely don't realize it yet themselves. The underlying cycle genuinely never actually changes at its core. The mask genuinely doesn't stay on forever for anyone. The exact same patterns will inevitably surface again eventually. The exact same wounds will inevitably reopen again. The exact same role you once played will simply be reassigned to someone entirely new instead, because the narcissist genuinely isn't changing at all fundamentally. They're simply reenacting the same pattern endlessly, compulsively, and genuinely tragically over and over again. And in the middle of all this ongoing chaos, you're actually doing something genuinely extraordinary. Yourself. Even if you don't fully realize it yet consciously, you're actually healing in real time throughout this entire process. You're genuinely learning how to sit with real discomfort without abandoning yourself in the process. You're genuinely learning how to notice manipulation tactics without falling for them anymore. You're genuinely learning the crucial difference between authentic love and simple longing, between genuine attachment and unhealthy trauma bonding, between real peace and simple emotional numbness instead. Your nervous system is slowly remembering exactly what genuine safety actually feels like again. Your natural intuition is gradually coming back online within you. Your genuine sense of self is steadily returning piece by piece, like a long, slow sunrise emerging after years spent in complete darkness. You may notice that you cry considerably more now, or perhaps considerably less than before. You may find yourself sleeping quite differently than usual. You may experience dreams that genuinely feel like actual memories, and memories that genuinely feel like dreams instead. You may feel intense anger you were genuinely never previously allowed to feel before, genuine grief you were never given proper permission to express openly, confusion that arrives in distinct waves followed by clarity that feels almost genuinely sacred afterward. This isn't genuine regression happening to you at all. This represents genuine integration instead. This is your own psyche finally being allowed to properly process everything it previously had to suppress just to survive the situation. And one day, often completely without any warning whatsoever, you'll notice something quiet yet genuinely profound happening within you. You'll think about them specifically and feel genuinely nothing at all. Not love, not hate, not lingering longing, not simmering rage. Just a clean, calm, completely neutral knowing instead. The particular kind of knowing that genuinely doesn't need to argue with anyone, doesn't need to explain itself to anyone, doesn't need to be understood by anyone else except yourself alone. That represents the exact moment your nervous system finally genuinely releases them completely. That represents the moment the entire spell genuinely breaks completely. That represents the moment you genuinely become unreachable to them entirely. Not because you built some kind of protective wall around yourself, but because you genuinely built an authentic self instead. Seeing clearly through a narcissist isn't simply an act of basic perception. It represents an actual act of genuine liberation instead. It represents the very beginning of true psychological freedom for you. It represents the moment your entire inner world stops being colonized by someone else's ongoing chaos. It represents the moment you genuinely stop translating their harmful behavior into being somehow your own personal fault. It represents the moment you genuinely reclaim all the parts of yourself you previously abandoned simply to help keep the peace between you, your authentic voice, your natural softness, your genuine intuition, your genuine laughter, your personal boundaries, your own time, your own dreams, your own body, your own future. And the most genuinely beautiful part of all this is simply this: you genuinely don't have to confront them directly to become free. You don't have to win some kind of argument with them, receive a genuine apology from them, obtain proper closure, or be understood by them at all. Your personal freedom genuinely doesn't depend on their own awakening whatsoever. It depends entirely on your own awakening instead, and yours has genuinely already begun. The simple fact that you're here right now, genuinely reading these words, breathing slowly and deliberately, recognizing yourself clearly within every single sentence, represents genuine proof that something inside you genuinely can no longer be silenced anymore. Because what genuinely happens when a narcissist finally realizes you see completely through them represents only half of the entire story. The other half represents what genuinely happens when you finally realize you were always so much more than they could ever possibly control. And that particular realization, quiet as it genuinely begins, represents the actual sound of your real life finally starting.